Okay, I think we're live. I just found out that I can't stream to Twitter or X after all because I have to pay for that, and I refuse to do that on short notice. But otherwise, here we are streaming on YouTube and Twitch for the first time. So if you're in the Twitch audience and I don't acknowledge you, it's probably because I haven't figured out just how to do that yet. Back with me again is Zulu. We're going to jump right into some callers, hopefully. If you haven't joined the call queue yet, please follow the Discord link and hop in there. Otherwise, Zulu, if it's okay with you, we can probably just jump right into some text questions.
Absolutely.
All right. So the first one I got here, these are not in any particular order. I think these are just roughly in the order of what's most interesting is I don't know if this is going to be even something we can have time to get into, but regarding the accumulation of capital, what is your response to the idea that this accumulation of capital may take precedence over principles like the NAP? At what point can we trust private entities to continue abiding by rules meant to protect the sovereignty of individuals over the rule of profit? So, my first thing I'm going to say to that is I think the question is communicating some presuppositions about our position, maybe that aren't necessarily true. But what's your first impressions there, Zulu?
Yeah, I mean, I suspect what you're getting at there is I don't know of any anarcho-capitalist claiming that it's impossible for somebody to decide to go for accumulating capital over and above anarcho-capitalist principles. Certainly, this happens almost all the time, right? Where I don't think any anarcho-capitalist is disagreeing with that fact. Now, so then I suppose the question would be, well, what should be done about that? Well, what should be done about that is that those aggressive actions, aggressively trying to accumulate capital, well, that should be stopped. We should try and resist that in some sort of way. And if you had some sort of more anarcho-capitalist society, well, that a prerequisite for that would be that at least some critical mass of people agree with us that such things are untoward and should be stopped. So I don't think you should really, if we're assuming that sort of society, well then it's not really going to be hospitable towards that type of thing. Just as it's currently not hospitable for me to go and murder my neighbors, for instance, that would not fly in our society because there's plenty of norms against that. Most vast majority of people think that's uncouth behavior, so they're going to stop me from doing that.
Yes, I think I agree with that completely. And I would also like to just add that if I could summarize a single point um, to sort of assuage this caller's concerns, is that just because what we're advocating for, one of the things that we're going to say about it is that capital is healthiest in an Ancap society. We're not also communicating that that's the motive or the underlying principle. That's just one of the benefits. So we wouldn't necessarily, like Zulu was saying, we wouldn't supplant the principles in favor of the capital accumulation. I think we'll move on to the next question, which is this is the shorter one. It says, "What does ANCAP libertarian ethics say about running propaganda operations like the states do?" I don't mean the states like the United States. I mean states in the general sense.
Well, so I mean, propaganda itself isn't inherently a bad thing, so long as you're not being deceptive with your propaganda. Right? I mean, in a sense, that's exactly what we're doing with this show. We're trying to propagandize anarcho-capitalism, so more people become anarcho-capitalists. Um, so I'm not really sure what specific angle the question is being asked from. Like, I suppose, are we against state propaganda? I mean, well, yeah, we're against all propaganda which doesn't align with our views.
Yep, couldn't have said it better myself. We're really knocking out the text questions rapid fire here. I do want to see some callers today. So if anybody wants to, don't forget you can join our Discord. The link is pinned in the pinned comment in the YouTube comment section. Join the Discord, join the waiting room. It's a voice chat channel, and you will get on the air right away. We have a call screener, but he's very friendly and it's quick to get through. So we'll move on to the next one, which is a strategy question. And then we have an objectivism question following that one. So the strategy question is, in the UK, 10% of the government budget goes towards state pensions. If the elderly lose those pensions, it's very conceivable that they could just die some way or another. As Ancaps, how are we any better than Stalin if we take away state pensions from these people immediately without slowly phasing it out to avoid this? Secondly, if we do slowly phase it out, the next generation usually pays the last one's pension through tax. What policy proposal can we offer that doesn't collapse the economy? Not a bad thing, in brackets here. People just won't go for it. That will slowly take out the state pension from our government spending.
So, on the as bad as Stalin point, I think this is inverting the actual moral culpability here. People aren't allowed to just be eternal parasites. I mean, yeah, elderly people do tend to die for one reason or another. That's it happens a lot with the elderly. So I wouldn't be surprised if they continue dying after abolishing pensions. I suppose the question would really be, well, without being able to be a parasite any longer, maybe they're going to die sooner. Well, that doesn't give them the right to be a parasite. Now, it might be the case that I am a vampire of some description, and I can extend my lifespan if I feed on the blood of the innocent. Now, just because I can indeed extend my lifespan that way, doesn't give me the damn right to, right? And fundamentally, this whole pension thing, this is how state pensions always operate. It's just a massive, massive Ponzi scheme where you keep passing the buck on to the next generation over and over and over again. Like, eventually, that simply will run up against reality. This is not a thing that can continue forever, right? It's going to again keep swallowing up more and more and more and more, keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse every generation, until eventually there just isn't enough capital to keep the system solvent. At which point it simply will just collapse overnight. Like, it is going to do that overnight, if there isn't enough capital to keep it solvent. And if that happens, well, there will be a whole lot of other very terrible things happening right along with it. Whereas that wouldn't really occur if we were to do it through more standard means of, signing the big "there are no more state pensions" bill. If they sign that and got rid of it, lickety split, yeah, there is going to be some sort of bust phase there, because a lot of people have foolishly allocated their resources on the premise that this Ponzi scheme will keep going and sustain them, which fundamentally that was their fault. They shouldn't have done that. So there will be a bust phase there when they realize, when all these malinvestments become clear. But the bust, you don't stop the bust by getting another boom going. This is what the Austrian business cycle theory tells us. You don't suddenly make those malinvestments into correct investments just by siphoning capital off from the market. All you do there is make the inevitable bust, and it is inevitable. All you do is make that inevitable bust phase worse than it would have been otherwise. So I think that's that answers it on the strategic point, like how to go about talking about this sort of thing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the economic aspect and the political aspect there. This topic kind of reminds me of something I heard a lot back in my atheism days on the atheism and theism debate part of YouTube. There's an argument that comes up when we're talking about the moral side of and I swear this loops back to anarchism. There's this sort of idea that if you convert somebody, so somebody believes in God, and then you start telling them that they're not, there is no God, there is no heaven. And it'll be said once in a while, like if you're in that circle, you'll hear once in a while, like, don't you feel bad about, these people believe they're going to see their loved ones again. These people believe they're going to live forever. Don't you feel bad about taking that away from them? And it always seems to me that the real fault lies with giving somebody a fake winning lottery ticket. That's if it is fundamentally, if it's not a real lottery ticket, the person who's giving you that lie is the one who's setting you up for disappointment. The people who are, acting as the barrier where eventually you come up against reality, they're not the ones who sold you down the river. They're not the ones who set you up for disappointment. And I don't think that the blame lies for them. And I wonder, Zulu, if you agree with me that this has sort of the exact same structure where like you were saying, the pension system has to end eventually. It's just not sustainable. And a lot of people who are on these pension systems, they've never been educated about what it even is that they're participating in. They've just been lied to about what they're entitled to and how sustainable it is. Us and our efforts to communicate the reality of the situation to people is not where the moral fault lies. It's the people who put them into a vulnerable position on false premises in the first place that I would say are at fault here from a ethical point of view.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. And this is across the board. Whenever you're giving out these fiat goodies, um, well, by the nature of being a fiat goodie, it's not actually real, right? That's not, you haven't actually become wealthier there. All that's happened is that the damages being done have just kind of been swept under the rug, but those damages still do exist. It's not the case that Robinson Crusoe on the island, if he eats a bunch of hallucinogenic mushrooms and believes he has a far greater stockpile of resource than he actually does, the problem there isn't when he sobers up and realizes that, oh, I probably actually can't build my own cruise liner. I should probably get back to trying to fix my leaky roof. That's not the problematic part, which is the bust phase. That's a good part, right? That's him coming back to reality again. The problematic part was taking those hallucinogenic mushrooms in the first place. You should not have that hallucination of fake goodies, and yeah, that's where the problem lies.
Agreed. Well, that's perfect timing because we've got our first caller who's coming in. This is an Ancap or Ancap friendly caller who's got some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and pull them up. Jamie, you're on the line.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
I sure can. So you're calling in because we've got some questions here about the idea of hijacked wills. So just a little bit of background for everybody. Jamie and I and some other people in our Discord community, we've been sort of working out some of the implications of the non-aggression principle and the first comer derived property rights. And we've been thinking about hypotheticals concerning, like, what if somebody points a gun at you and tells you, like with the bank teller, what if somebody tells you to hand over the money? If it's not your money, are you committing an aggression by doing it? Or if somebody straps a bomb to you and says, hey, you got to go stab a random person in the plaza or I'll detonate this bomb and kill you. So that's kind of what we've been talking about in the server and trying to get to a concrete answer about. Jamie, you're calling in. What would you like to talk about on the call today regarding that?
Well, I just kind of wanted to ask Zulu's opinion on it. We've had a lot of really good discussions so far. So it's actually kind of weird that the discussion moved away from what it originally was. Now it's kind of become something else. I'm sorry, Galazar, I haven't had a chance to read your whole draft yet. I'm still working on it. But yeah, I guess the most basic question to start with would be, I wonder what Zulu's thoughts would be on the terrorist situation that you said, where a terrorist straps a bomb to you, says you have to kill somebody at random or else I'm going to blow up the bomb. Are you allowed, as the person with a bomb strapped to you, to just go out and kill somebody to save yourself? Are you partially responsible, fully responsible, not responsible at all for the actions that you take? Is it even you taking the actions? I think there was some dispute about that your will has kind of been suppressed, your body's been stolen. That was somebody's opinion. So I'm just interested in hearing Zulu's thoughts.
Sure. So I think there are two different sort of lines that you can go down with this sort of question. One of them is, well, is this a human shield scenario? Because I do strongly believe that you're allowed to shoot through the human shield in order to kill the aggressor if that's necessary to do, because you're allowed to defend your property, of course. So, and the other one is, on the other side, is the bank teller principle, which I developed with a few other collaborators. Namely, that, hey, somebody sticks a gun to the bank teller's head and says, give me the money in the cash register or I will shoot you in the head. Now, on the bank teller principle, I came to the view that, well, resisting that in any human way actually isn't going to exclude the guy from the money. He can just very easily shoot the lady, reach over and grab the money, and then piss off. So by refusing to hand over the money, she hasn't actually done anything to exclude him. So therefore, handing over the money, that's not in any way doing the aggression herself. That's just simply she has no means to exclude this crime being done. So in the case of the person with the bomb strapped to them, I think there was the pizza delivery bank robber or whatever. It was like some pizza delivery guy who had a bomb necklace strapped to him, and he went in and he said, "Hey," you handed her a note like, "Hey, you gotta give me the money or else this bomb's gonna blow up and I'll die." And they gave him a gun, so it's sort of similar to that. Where I don't think if somebody straps a bomb to you and says, "Go kill that guy, or else I'll blow you up," I don't think that's a valid human shield situation. I think that's because this is a bystander in this case. In my language, they're a bystander because, well, shooting them doesn't actually achieve anything to defend your property. Whereas if it was somebody I'd taken you as a human shield and I was shooting at Galazar, well, Galazar shooting through you and piercing my heart, in fact, does do something to exclude me from his property, his body, to wit, right? That is the distinction there, I think. So I don't think that having a bomb strapped to you means that you then have a right to go out and start shooting at bystanders. Your defensive actions have to be directed towards the attacker, or else they're not defensive actions.
Okay, so it wouldn't be the case that you, as the person with a bomb strapped to you, could, I don't know, kill somebody else to kind of save yourself in that scenario.
Yeah, I don't think it's the case that you'd be allowed to obey the bomber's demands there.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think Galazar was sort of that view, although maybe for different reasons. I'm not the best to explain his position. He could probably do that a lot better than me. But
well,
anyway.
yeah, we're on the same page there. I think Zulu and I have like only very like superficial differences in how we maybe phrase it. I think I want to give some credit to Doge, one of the community members who had he said it really beautifully. I haven't really got it right in front of me here, so I'm going to have to paraphrase it, and it won't be as beautifully said. But essentially, what it comes down to is if you're in a situation where basically like you have choice, you can never be alienated from your own choices. But even if the only choices you have is comply and do whatever, or resist, and resist is death. So you've only really got two options. One of them is death. That's still you do get the option to choose. What we were looking at as being the functionally relevant criteria here is if the robber is going to take possession of the property that's in question, no matter what you do, then it's not about whether or not you have a choice. It's about, like Zulu said, he said it in terms of exclusion. You can't, like, nothing you do is actually going to be relevant to excluding this robber. In my phrasing, I was saying essentially the same thing, and in Doge's phrasing, but we were using different words. So instead of talking about exclusion, it's just that in every sense, that because all of the different every possible thing you can do still results in the robber taking possession, that indicates that the robber is like the situation's developed to the point where the robber is already in possession by virtue of the fact that everything that develops from that point results in his possession. So he's already got it in a sense. So if he's already taken possession of it, you can't be guilty of handing it over. So that criteria makes it clear that what's the difference is, like Zulu's talking about a human shield. The criteria that we're looking at, it's kind of like a different, I think it gets to the same place, but it's a different angle, is if you're in a situation where it's not guaranteed. So, for example, if you have the control of access to a bank vault and the robber absolutely cannot get into the bank vault unless you let him in, then you will have aggressed by letting him into the bank vault. Because his access, his possession of what's in the bank vault was conditional on your choice.
Would that be a guilty act? Like, or would you owe restitution or retribution in that case?
Well, I think like relative to where we're at with this right now, I think the most important thing to think about is just to break it down to the functional legal occurrences that are happening, right? So take the robber out of it for a moment. If you are using someone else's property in a way that's not consistent with the way they want it used, right? At the bare minimum, you've got to stop, and then you have to put it back to the way that it was. And the further you get away from that original state, the more restitution that you're going to owe. And the more, I think, if we invoke estoppel, the more retribution you're going to be potentially liable for in having to make up, the damages. What do you think about all this stuff you're hearing, Zulu, so far?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with your viewpoint so far as I understand it. That, like, for instance, in the case of the bank teller, the person who in fact can exclude them from the bank vault, well, in that case, the bank vault is essentially a bystander here. Though it's strange to think of them in that way.
At the very least, the people who own the property that's in the bank vault are bystanders, even if they're not on site at the moment. So yeah, I think that's the most, as far as I'm aware at the moment, that's the most consistent way of sort of approaching those issues.
All right, awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I wonder how, I guess it would apply the same way to like a slave army or like a draft, I guess would be a kind of a modern equivalent to the slave army. So, your superiors tell you to go firebomb the city of the enemy or else they're going to shoot you for, refusing orders. You would still have to refuse the orders in that case.
Absolutely, yeah. And, obviously the drafted person, they're not inherently evil just for going to the front lines. But don't deliberately kill anybody, or else, well, you're a murderer in that case. Now, as it turns out, with drafted soldiers, very often they're a lot worse than actual professional soldiers because they don't want to be going out there and shooting people. And you saw this in like World War II, I believe it was, where like I think less than like 2% of people shooting were actually aiming at somebody. They were aiming kind of like a little bit to the side because they didn't want to shoot a person, which is why they've developed modern methods of basically, those ones where like a target will suddenly just like pop up and you've got to react and shoot as fast as possible in order to get through the course. They developed that so that soldiers would shoot before they could have a chance to think about it and go, actually, I'm not going to shoot this person who isn't an immediate danger towards me. I believe they call it trigger finger frostbite, where very, very exceedingly few people are actually capable of pulling that trigger unless they perceive that other person to be like an apparent threat who's about to kill them or something.
Okay. Yeah. So thanks for your time, guys. It's been an interesting discussion so far on the server and here.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for calling. I mean, it's been a very productive conversation. It's so gratifying to take this sort of obscure aspect of the theory and its implications and get to work it out and massage it into something very concrete. I want to say before you go too, you might be interested in this. There's something I think that's interesting, kind of jumps out at me is we're talking about drafted soldiers, and we also talked about the criteria for when these activities are permissible or not. So, what about a situation where, your gang of conscripted soldiers are ordered to firebomb a city or whatever, and you're like, I don't, I'm not going to participate in this. But then your crewmates are saying, actually, if our squadron doesn't do it, there's another squadron's going to do it anyway. So what do you think, Sulu? Is that a get out of jail free card for the aces to firebomb the city anyway?
Yeah, no, not really. It might be that there's a maybe somebody's dropped their wallet, and if you're a particularly like narcissistic person, you might go, well, I'll take that wallet. They're stupid. I'm going to take that wallet. If I don't take it, well, somebody else is just going to get it anyway. This idiot's walking off. Somebody else will be able to get that wallet if I don't get it. That it doesn't give you license to steal or commit murder or do any other crimes just because somebody else may or may not take up that opportunity and do it. Because obviously, as it turns out, if the squadrons start refusing orders on like the whole squadron's refusing orders, well, that can actually change how powerful the people at the top are. If there's enough people just refusing orders underneath them, well then generals can go like, hey, look, my men are not going to be doing this. I'm out. Do you want a civil war on your hands here or what? And then it can go in different ways. If you have even just a few people in that room saying, no, I'm not going to do this, well, then it gives other people who are thinking the exact same thing the confidence to speak up and say, yeah, I'm also not backing you on this one. I'm backing him. We're not doing this war crime here.
Cool. Yeah. So thanks, Gallagher. That was a good question too. So I guess I'll hop off for now and try and come up with some more questions for next time.
Awesome. Thanks so much. It's been very productive so far. Appreciate the call. We're just going to go through some more text questions now. That was Jamie. As always, a very productive chat. Zulu, I got an interesting one here. I don't know if you want to get into it, but it came through on our YouTube comments. So the question reads,
I believe I was looking at the exact same one, actually.
Oh, by Judas.
Yes.
Do you want to take a crack at that?
Absolutely, yes. So yeah, he was and I was thinking this was a good one as well. Yeah, so it's from GI Judas saying, didn't Liquid Zulu say he wouldn't steal the penny in his NEP debate with Dave Smith? Does the bank teller principle not apply in that hypothetical? So in certain ways of stating the hypothetical, yes. If it's the Martians come down and say, hey, there's that penny there that guy's got, give it to us or else, we'll blow up the world. Well, yeah, in that case, yeah, it's very much a bank teller situation. But the hypothetical does explicitly say steal. So in that case, well, the bank teller isn't actually stealing the money. So that becomes problematic. So you have to really torture the hypothetical if you want it to actually come out as literally being a theft being done. And this is one thing that I tried getting into in that debate was, well, just how tortured you have to make this hypothetical in order to make it literally be steal, right? Now, I can take that. I can offload all that work and just go, yeah, no, I wouldn't steal. I would not steal under any circumstances, because that's what's being asked. It's basically being asked, is the NEP true? And I'm saying, yes, the NEP is indeed true. But in order to, if you're going to try and berate someone with that, it's like, okay, well, yeah, if you have to come up with this nonsense, impossible thing to happen in order for the NEP to come out with weird outcomes, it's like, sure, buddy, if you it's that computer science term where shit in, shit out, right? If you're giving something shit data, then you're going to get shit outputs. That's how it goes in philosophy, as it is in everywhere else.
I'll throw in, I think, a somewhat so this is a little bit more on a subjectivist point of view on that, and I'm not even saying I even necessarily accept this, but in some conversations I've had, I've found it useful to approach the NAP not as an objective truth, and that's not in any way to discredit whether or not I think it actually is, but rather just because I'm talking to certain people about I'm trying to meet them where they're at, is what I'm trying to say. It's more of a strategic or a tactical decision. Anyway, my point is that in those conversations, I have spoken about the NAP is objectively true relative to your commitment to cooperating with other people rather than treating them like they're just tools or obstacles. And in that framework, there's something sort of, I think, for somebody who's interested in that point of view, and I think most of our audience is actually, I'm pretty sure after talking to a lot of you guys, that it's pretty much just objectivists out here. But in that framework, it would be the case that you could say that if somebody is willing to let the entire planet get destroyed to save a penny that they're not even going to have after the planet gets destroyed anyway, so it's kind of like a productive or anti-productive thought process for that person. that they're sort of putting themselves outside of the NAP because they're not committed to the cooperation that is required to make sense of the NAP in the first place. So I didn't want to say that as here's my argument, but this show we're all about. I actually meant to do a little preamble at the start of the show, but we kind of jumped right into it and I forgot. The show I want to give a lot of different aspects on how Ancap is kind of like a blossoming flower with lots of different petals, and we're not trying to be gatekeepers here about anything other than the NAP itself. So that's my input. You don't have anything else you'd like to say about that before we move on, Zulu?
Sorry, can you? I was looking over for the next question. My notes. Can you please repeat the last little bit of what you're saying?
Sure. Well, I was just giving like a sort of semi-serious subjectivist point of view, not even my point of view, just sort of appealing to some arguments I've overheard in the community in the past about how so the gist of it was that in order to, like, for a non-objectivist, in order to take the NAP on, you have to make certain assumptions about your willingness to cooperate with other human beings. Like, in other words, it doesn't apply to people who are just barbarians, who are committed to just, they're not concerned with your ends. They're not concerned, like, you're just either a means to them or you're an obstacle to them. So there's a sort of, I was just going to say, there's a sort of assumption you have to make with the NAP from the subjectivist camp that you're committed to cooperation at some level. And if you're in that particular bubble, then choosing not to give the penny up to the aliens. So you're the possessor of the penny. The government or whoever it is, the men in black, but they're not the government. It's the Ancap men in black. They show up. They're like, "Hi, we're trying to deal with the alien menace. We need this penny for whatever reason. It's the only thing they'll accept to not blow up the planet." And you're like, "No, I won't give it to you." And obviously that's counterproductive because you're going to lose the penny anyway because the Earth's going to get blown up. If that's the case, then it's kind of like, for those subjectivist approaches to ANCAP, it seems that that person is rejecting the cooperative assumptions you have to make for the NAP in the first place in a kind of way that makes them like an outlaw. And I thought that was, I'm not saying that I'm advocating for that approach. I just think that for like the broader ANCAP ecosystem, it's an interesting thing to sort of to look at.
It is it is sort of worthwhile trying to generate some sort of theory of mind for the person who would refuse. And you very quickly come to the understanding, like, well, such a person probably wouldn't be able to get a penny or live for very long at all if you had an even moderately rational society. Like this would have to be somebody so outright insane that, like, you can barely even like analyze them as rational beings any longer. Like, they're just randomly babbling almost. And so it does put into context the answer to the would you steal a penny to save the world thing, is that, well, in fact, in all likelihood, it would be impossible for me to steal a penny to save the world, because any given person that I've ever met in my entire life or ever heard of my entire life would instantaneously give up their penny in order to save the world. And so therefore I would not be able to steal that penny from them. So then then it's basically saying the hypothetical is, if anybody's a fan of Oni NG, it's sort of like a Tomer. The Martians come to Earth and they blow it up. What do? It's like, well, fucking nothing. I do nothing then, I guess. Like, well, what do you want me to answer there? I pray, I pray and hope that fucking God will come down, Jesus Christ will come down and smite them in some way. Like, what? There is nothing I can do at that point based on the setup of the hypothetical scenario. There's no possible strategy I can implement in order to change anything about the outcome. So it's really quite irrelevant. Now, if you start altering the hypothetical to where the aliens are going to maybe blow up all of the United Kingdom, so I'll die, and they say, hey, we will not blow up the United Kingdom if you nuke Berlin, right? We will leave and we will go back home, right? And then it is in fact the case that, well, there's probably a great many people in Berlin who would absolutely say, no, do not bloody well nuke me. And when you start making the scenario going away from the impossible, well, it becomes a lot clearer why the NEP is in fact correct. You're not allowed to just go around killing people. This relates to our last question. You're not allowed to just go around killing people because your own life is in danger. That's not okay. So, in order to make the NEP sound insane, you have to come up with insane and or impossible situations.
I think that's the perfect bow to put on that, and just in time for our next caller, who has got a pretty straightforward question for us. So, Baz, you're on the line. Can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I certainly can. It looks like you've got a question about how we ground ownership.
Yeah, I'd like to ask how you specifically define ownership and why you believe that's the correct definition.
All right, Zulu, you want to take the first crack at this?
Sure. So I do have a section in my course, which I believe is in the description actually.
It sure is.
So on the lesson number 3 on homesteading and property rights, I've got this section called direction versus possession. What is ownership? Where I go over how, well, there actually are different, entirely compatible definitions of ownership. In basic terms, it is the right to control some resource, which is also the same as saying the right to exclude people from that thing, exclude any actions that would conflict with your actions, namely. So how we get to this, why this is the correct definition, is because it's rooted directly in the first principles induction of property rights, right? We go out and we see, well, there is this thing called scarcity. So what are we supposed to do with scarcity? And I've gone over this argument multiple times, so I'm not going to belabor it too heavily. But basically, it's like, okay, well, the first comer, as it turns out, is the person who has the right to use that thing. And, well, right to use that thing, what does that imply? With our non-aggression principle, implies that, well, nobody else is allowed to come in and use it in incompatible ways. Well, so then what is a property right? A property right is their right to exclude, prevent those incompatible things from happening. Namely, it's the right to prevent aggression, because we have the non-aggression principle, right? So that's where we get to our understanding of property rights. It's directly rooted in our more fundamental understanding of, well, what are we even doing when we're doing law here?
Yeah, I think if I was going to say anything, it would just be to put what Zulu already said into my own words, and I think if I was to do that in as few words as possible. What is ownership relative to? It's relative to trying to solve that beloved problem that Zulu invoked, which is scarcity, and we are essentially scarcity imposes certain problems on us, and so we want to be in a state where those problems aren't affecting us anymore, and we don't need to get into them. But you can just think of them like the fact that you can't anticipate if something's going to be available to you in any kind of, over time, because at any point somebody else could just come along and take it, those kinds of problems. So all we want to try to do here is figure out how can we be outside of that artificially, because we're unavoidably subjected to it in terms of its element. It's an element of nature. But what can we do at least regarding the people we're participating with, right? Obviously, you can't get out of it if there's just going to be people around you who aren't going to participate it. But for the participants in the rule, what rule makes it so that those negative consequences of scarcity are no longer there. And there's only one way to do that. There's only one way to do that, and that is to have a single owner. An owner means that you can use it, the non-owners can't use it, and you can't be alienated from it. And the objective aspect of this, what makes this objectively justified, is that any other configuration of trying to solve this problem, like for example, co-ownership. A lot of people argue, I mean, you've been a participant of this exact argument yourself earlier today, I think, in the Discord. If you're in a co-ownership situation, let's say Zulu and I co-own something, a house. If you're in a co-ownership situation, then maybe Zulu and I are not subject to the problems of scarcity with relation to you, a non-owner, but amongst ourselves, we're completely constrained within that exact same set of problems. So I think that that's, like Zulu said, I don't want to make this a university length lecture. So I think that that's our two perspectives on that.
Thank you very much.
How do you feel about that? Did you feel that that was convincing?
Yeah, I'll look into the course to see if I can like try and add to my own argument, I suppose.
Sure.
But yeah, that was convincing. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, feel free to call back anytime, and certainly you can reach out to us on the Discord as well. Thanks so much, Bazuna. That was our second caller. And right, it's time for us to go back to some text questions. We've got a whole bunch of text questions coming in, and we have other callers in the queue. So if you prefer to listen to callers, don't worry. They're just behind us here. But before we get to them, let's do this one. Let's see. Would the concept of implicit danger ultimately be determined subjectively, or is there an objective metric for deciding when someone poses a sufficient threat that intervention against them would be justified as a response to aggression?
So I think it is. I don't think it's just purely subjectively, which I'm interpreting as meaning like, oh well, I just kind of feel like that guy's an implicit danger for arbitrary reasons. I think there's very real reasons when you can see that somebody is a danger. If I am running towards you, covered in blood, and I've got an axe over my head, and I'm saying I'm going to kill you right now, I don't think it's being a subjectivist to say, like, oh well, I don't know why. I just have this kind of ineffable feeling that this guy might want to do me harm. It is in fact, well, objectively, because as it turns out, humans are able to read situations and figure out, model other people's motivations and so on and so forth. Turns out humans are able to do that, and we're able to do it very accurately and go, yeah, no, this guy means me harm. This guy is dangerous. This guy who calls himself Axe Murderer Jimmy and is currently axing down my door, probably doesn't just want to damage my door. He probably wants to chop my head off like he's done to all of my neighbors, and now this is just the next house on his line. I'm able to say, no, this guy is a very real and present danger to my life.
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, look, how many times am I going to say this? Zulu's right. I think to add my 2 cents onto this, I want to invoke this word forensic. What forensic means is essentially the study, forensic psychology, forensic, whatever. Everything that's forensic is about admissible in court. And so to give the devil his due, I think with what this the core of this question has to do with the fact that we as humans have limited knowledge. So just because there is some objective criterion out there does not imply that we're going to be able to have absolute certainty about it. But like Zulu said, we can have certainty to the point that it's not really like within the forensics context. What possible more evidence would be necessary to establish that you were at least justified? You can go through a set of hypotheticals about this to make it, I think, more clear. And I mean, we're just kind of stalling here for this caller. So I will go through the hypotheticals. If you see a rock coming down a hill towards you, you don't need to wonder about am I actually in the Matrix? And is this perhaps just like a a program and the rock actually poses no risk to me, seeing the rock coming towards you is sufficient to warrant your moving out of the way. And if you change it from being a rock to being a person who's behind a car and you can see the car is speeding towards you, then you have sufficient information through your senses to see that, if I don't do something about this, get out of the way or raise one of those barriers that comes up, then this car is going to hit me. And the fact that a car hits you constitutes an exclusive use of your body with your intentions for your body, I think is actually objective. Um, I think there's no real leeway around that. So we can just keep going through those kinds of hypotheticals, moving from like completely natural to completely intentional, and see we're really just talking about the forensic context in that question. And it is most of the time not that confusing of a context unless you accidentally confuse it with the question of how do we distinguish between what's right and wrong. What do you think, Sulu?
Yeah, no, it's because this question, what it really digs at is epistemology. Because indeed, if you're some sort of a Humean skeptic, and you see a boulder rolling towards you, if you're truly consistent, it's like, well, I have absolutely no information here to go off of. Maybe the boulder will crush me, or maybe it's going to morph into Hegel, or maybe it's going to roll up the hill instead. Anything could happen here, and I have no way of knowing what's going to occur. But if you have a rational epistemology, and you understand that man can indeed know things through the use of his senses, he can discover true things about reality, well, then it kind of just all crumbles away. Somebody saying, well, maybe the axe murderer, maybe he was just going to plant a kiss on your cheek, and he was gonna, maybe he's just gonna come up and say, hey, I found your axe, I wanted to return it to you, so on and so forth. That sounds as out there. It's the same sort of mistake as saying, well, maybe the boulder rolling down the hill is going to turn into Hegel in the next second, and then I've got nothing to worry about. It relies on a complete abandonment of any means of gaining knowledge about the world.
100%. Well, that is a perfect segue for us to go into our next caller. Javier, you're on the line. We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Hello, good friends. Yes. Hello there. Nice to meet you both.
Likewise. Thanks so much for calling in. My call screener gave me an idea about what you wanted to call in about with regard to the NAP, but why don't you just take the floor and share your question with us?
Yeah, so this is the question I wrote down. I'll just read it. Does the NAP lead to such counterintuitive conclusions where it is reasonable to doubt the NAP being true or warranted? So I'll let you write that down, and then, sooner or later you can maybe ask me some clarity. I can ask you some clarity, or do you want me to explain?
I don't want to, unless Zulu wants to jump in here ahead of me. I am assuming that what our answer is going to be here is we would need to see some examples of such a conclusion to sort of jump into it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So one example would be if we were to imagine a scenario, because the way I understand the NAP is that it's immoral to interfere or prevent the use or the exercise of a person's bodily autonomy, as long as they're not interfering with anybody else's bodily autonomy, more or less. I could be wrong, but that's the general gist I got. And so with that, principle at hand, I was thinking to myself, okay, well, suppose there is a scenario where, let's say, for starters, we have a couple, right? A couple who they're husband and wife, but then the wife, let's say they pass away, but then the wife left in her will that she grants permission and does have wishes for her husband to use her corpse as a sexual object in order to alleviate his grief or his depression because the wife has passed away, but also because the wife also just wants these wishes to be respected. So that's one, I guess, counter example that seems quite counterintuitive. I'm wondering, do you guys think this is a plausible counterexample? Do you guys think this is bullshit? Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Or do you guys think this is like a wacky scenario or whatever?
Don't worry, dude. Saying bullshit is not as bad as the hypothetical itself, so we're all good on that
Sure.
front.
Thank you.
I don't know, Zulu. I feel like you're chomping at the bit to answer this one. I'll let you take the reins.
Yes, so I would, in the first case, question the use of hypothetical as a means to discover philosophy. I don't think it does that. Now, if you come to one of these strange conclusions, well, perhaps it's a sign that you should check your premises, make sure that you got everything right. Certainly, it's very useful for that. But if you check your premises and you're right, well, I mean, after a point, you've just got to accept that, yeah, that's a true thing that can happen. So, with this kind of necrophiliac couple, yeah, if you're a dead person, well, what is a body? It's a scarce resource. If you want to pass that scarce resource on to your husband to use as a, I suppose, flashlight after you're dead, well, that's entirely your right, and the husband would then own that body, and so he could do whatever the hell he wanted with it. Now, yes, it's strange. That's a very strange thing to do. I certainly wouldn't want to be, seen with such people. But, well, what is the question we're asking? We're not asking, is it good for the husband to be bonking his wife's corpse? The question is, well, what are other people allowed to do with respect to that? Are they allowed to come in and prevent that from happening and deprive this man of his wife's corpse and, perhaps physically beat him in order to get his clutches off of her? Well, our answer is no. You're not allowed to do that. What you are allowed to do is anything which doesn't constitute aggression. So you're allowed to, convince him that this is a bad thing to do. You're allowed to try and buy the corpse off of him if you want, and then you could put it in a graveyard, I suppose. You could ostracize him from the community, which I imagine he would be ostracized from most communities for this sort of thing. Like those are the types of activities which you're allowed to engage in on our view, because fundamentally what we're setting up here is sort of a perimeter of acceptable behaviors. We're not saying that everything within that perimeter is good. We're just saying it's not illicit, right? All we're saying is that these activities are not, in fact, not criminal. So it is not apt to be going out there and beating somebody for engaging in these activities. They are all licit. That's all we say as far as the law is concerned.
All right, got you. Galazar, do you have anything else to say before I give some responses? Because I was writing down the points here on my little notebook.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I do. I mean, geez, I'm going to start having to answer first, so I don't have to keep saying I agree with Zulu. But Zulu's correct about all of that. I feel that the most interesting part of this conversation is just around the corner. So let's move on to your response.
Okay, yeah. Before I give a full response, I just need to ask one clarifying question, or maybe two, if that's cool. When you brought up the point concerning the scenario as wacky or strange, or when you stated the use of hypotheticals may not be a good way of doing.
I do want to clarify. I'm not saying that the scenario itself is necessarily wacky. I think it's a perfectly fine hypothetical to use. I'm saying that the behavior he's doing is very wacky.
Oh, okay. All right. Gotcha. Okay. Never mind then. Okay. On that one, I don't think we'll have much disagreement there then, I think, with what you just clarified. Okay. The thing is that there's going to come a point where because if you grant this one, I want to see, is it to the point where you don't find these super counterintuitive where the principle at hand is just shaken into doubt? Because if this is granted, right, this one's granted, then I don't know how you would essentially just block it if we were just to go from a deeper one, from instead of the wife, right, it is now like the husband's or the father's child, so to speak, the corpse of the child. Like how do we start mitigating that if we're because one thing you could say, one avenue is this. One avenue, or at least an objection I would anticipate, is that you know, children own themselves, right? But the thing is, though, is that in reality, I feel like, or in practice, that's usually somewhat bullshit, in my opinion. Usually, what's doing most of the work when people say, "Oh, yeah, children have their own bodies, they own themselves," that's usually just comes down to like parental authority, right? No, like the more or less, it comes down to parental authority, or the family, quote unquote, owns the child as property, and that's why they command them to do certain things and whatnot, or what have you. So it's like, where do you see what I'm trying to get? Like, where do we go from here then?
So
Does that? Oh, yeah.
I think the most important thing to just put on a banner here is that what we're looking at here is essentially what's legal and illegal, or like Zulu said, what's criminal. That's what we're looking at, the criterion that distinguishes the legal from the illegal. So we are completely in agreement that something can simultaneously be illegal and completely abhorrent in a sort of intuitive disgust reaction way. Zulu already emphasized this himself. He said that he finds that this is a very like unsavory. That not quoting him there, but he found that this was an unsavory behavior. He wouldn't want to associate with those people whatsoever. So what I think is happening here, and I want to put this back on you and see if we can maybe drill down into this. We're following a principle that establishes what's criminal and what's legal. And we're saying, okay, well, given this principle that we've established, we're exploring the implications that come out of that. Now we reach an implication and there's some objection to it. So if you're objecting to it, you have to have some kind of even more foundational principle that you're using to determine what's legal and not legal, right? For example, is it sufficient to say something is disgusting that it has to be illegal? Is there another criterion? So that's, I think, maybe where the more interesting answer lies. Maybe this is unfair, but before you jump into that, maybe I think I saw Zulu was going to say something.
Yeah, no. Fundamentally, yeah, this would be a terrible thing to have happen. So the way you would deal with that is, in the ways I described. You can deal with it through ostracism. You can deal with it through, all sorts of different methods. Now, how he came into possession of a child's corpse is, we'll just assume that happened somehow, whatever. But I do want to note that, like, well, your proposed theory that in fact children don't own themselves and their family in some way owns them. Well, it strikes me that comes to a much worse reductio when it comes to living children. So I don't think that it is too problematic. Our view is certainly a lot less problematic than the view that children are owned by other people, that they are slaves, because, well, what are you allowed to do with property you own? Anything you goddamn want to. You could beat it. You could, cut their heads off. You could do all sorts of things.
Right. Real quick on the last point, and then I'll go ahead and answer the other points. On the last point, I was just resorting to like a descriptive fact how in practice it seems like this is like a common moral commitment, and so that is one avenue we can explore whether there can even be like further reductives even on living children, and then see whether my theory, because, well, technically speaking, I haven't proposed a theory yet. It's more so I'm trying to see primarily. I want to see how far or how many counterexamples can it take, or would it not take, to at least weaken your guys' NAP principle. Now, when it comes to the other points by Galazar, so clarifying question before I say my responses. Is the NAP a moral principle or is it like a legal principle? Because you brought up the distinction between because I always understood it, at least from my end, as it was generally a moral principle. Now it seems to me you guys are understanding it as a legal principle. And it's fine. We could discuss that. I just need clarity. Yeah.
So it is, depending on what you mean by moral, it is both right? Because I think law is a subset of ethics. Now, that's not saying that if something isn't aggression, therefore it's good. It's saying that it's not criminal, right? So it is fundamentally a legal question. And what that means, on my view is that committing a crime is immoral, that is unethical. It's not that not committing a crime is therefore ethical. It only answers on the negative side there.
Okay, because this is how I'm understanding it, like the way I understand legality or morality. And so I'll just say this, and we'll see if we have common agreement there. I understand that the laws or whatever is legal or illegal, generally speaking, it should be aligned with like what is the right thing to do, or what is moral or immoral, as far as it can be, right? In other words, if there's a legal, or if there's some legality, or there's some law in some society or what have you, and if it seems grossly immoral, then I'm like, okay, something's wrong here. We should probably reform like the legal system here. Is that fine, or no? Would you find issues with that?
I think that is a particular theory of what the law is, but not one I subscribe to. Because just saying that, well, this thing is very bad, that in itself is not enough to show the second claim that you're allowed to stop that thing by force. Right? Those are two separate claims. Now, so just show it. So then you would have to somehow show that in general, a thing being bad to some degree, therefore shows that other people should be allowed to stop that thing by force. That is the underlying premise there, which hasn't been demonstrated. Now,
Okay,
on
yeah.
our side, what the law is answering is, well, what do you do with respect to scarcity, right? So that's a entirely different like understanding of what the law is trying to answer there.
Okay, yeah. So so this is where I'll quote unquote demonstrate it. Though in the strict scientific sense or what have you, in a proof sense, I don't know if it quote unquote can, like philosophical truths or what have you, can be demonstrated in that sense, but we'll see. Because now this will be my main response. Because it seems to me, for me, it comes immediate where when it comes to, let's say, the wife example or the dead child corpse example, it does really strike me as intuitive where if I were to witness my neighbor, right, doing this, like in my local life, right, if I go outside and I see my neighbor doing this on his front lawn, then I do think it is more plausible than not, then I stop him from doing it. In other words, I just pull him off from the corpse. Now, of course, you may wonder, oh, how is that demonstrated? We need a further argument. But the thing is, though, is that I feel like once you start asking for further arguments when it comes to local, dare I say, commonsensical data, such as the one I given, I understand that. I understand it as in you're trying to say, well, it seems if it violates the NAP, we need a further argument as to why this should be violated. But at this point, that seems to assume the NAP, which is the very thing in dispute.
Well, so I mean, it strikes me that you're the one who is assuming his thesis with your whole idea, like, well, it just seems intuitive to me that I should be allowed to go over there and stop him. Well, what I read that as is you saying, well, in the first case, I reckon it's true that you should be allowed to go out and stop anybody who's doing something that I consider immoral. And then it's like, okay, well, explain that. And you're like, well, it just seems intuitive. Well, it's like, so you've just referred back to your thesis that we already accept that you accept this thesis to be true, but you haven't shown it to be true. That's the thing in dispute here.
So the issue is that, for one, it depends on what you mean by show. I think I've shown that the NAP can indeed be challenged by trying out those two hypotheticals, right? And then I tried showing how it can indeed easily apply to my next door neighbor, right?
Well,
Now,
let me just interject here, if I may. Sorry, I want to drill into the core disagreement here. With all due respect about your disagreement, what we're saying is we need some sort of process or criteria for how this is actually a substantial disagreement, because essentially what we're hearing from you, I'm paraphrasing here, but I think that this paraphrasing is faithful to what you're communicating to us, is that you don't like the conclusions that are coming from the and so like the language you're using, like this is intuitive to you, and you think it would be plausible that you would choose to stop somebody doing this. And all this language, I don't disagree that you feel that way. In fact, I'm sure that Zulu and I have made it clear that we share the sympathy, like we sympathize with the underlying sentiment. But what we're saying is we need to understand more clearly in what sense is this does this constitute some kind of problem for the principal? In other words, is the reason that this is a problem for the NAP just that you don't like it, or is there something concrete? Like for example, a super concrete thing would be if we found an example of it contradicting itself. Then we could say, on purely logical terms, we have to just throw it out, whether we like it or not. Now, we're not expecting that level of rigor, but we'd like to see something that's a little bit more substantial than that you don't like it. And I'm not trying to um, mischaracterize what you're saying in a sort of disrespectful way, but rather I'm trying to really communicate as clearly as possible what it is about the critique that you're rendering that is falling short.
So, thank you. So I'll clarify and then I'll try to give a full response. Though, to be clear, hopefully I can give the response as concise as I can. The issue is that this may come down to a disagreement with the way philosophy is done, which is why I had this worry when it came to my first question when it came to this call. Like I asked them, do you think hypotheticals or what have you can constitute evidence against moral theory, or wacky ones at least? Because the thing is, I think the way philosophy is done, and I think you two are also more or less along in the same boat with me, right? Because when it comes to me stating, hey, this seems impossible, this seems grotesque, that seems just morally abhorrent, sooner or later, right, we're going to be appealing what I would like to call these truth tingles, right? Or these moral intuitions, right? It could be secondary ones, tertiary ones, it could be maybe fundamental intuitions. And what I'm going to, forgive me if I say this, what I'm going to like immediately butt heads here with is the fact that I'm kind of like the only one in the room doing this, because I would then ask you, well, what justifies the NAP? Like, how do you engage with when it comes to moral philosophy? Because I think the charge against me was like, for my critique to be forceful, or at least to weaken the NAP in some sense, I need to perhaps appeal to the system contradicting itself, or the user or the interlocutor, doing like a performative contradiction. But here's the issue, though, right? Here's the problem I have with that. This assumes that contradictions, or performative contradictions at the very least, cannot be true. And that begs the question against, in some communities, against dialetheism. And here's the thing: I'm not a dialetheist. I think I actually agree with you guys. I don't think contradictions cannot be true. Yeah, they're always false. Yes, but the thing is, though, the way I know that is simply me reflecting on it, and then I grasp its truth. There's no what I don't know it because I feel it to be true. I don't know it because I see it out there in the world. I don't know. This is just me reflecting on it, and then I see that's true with my mind's eye. But I think the same thing is happening when it comes to this, when it comes to any moral philosophy, right? When I would question you, like, how do you know the NAP to be warranted?
Right. So I'm gonna just I'm gonna rehash something and see if I'm understanding correctly that we're gonna move on to the NAP now or not. So
okay, sure.
You and I and Zulu, we're all on the same lawn, and we see our neighbor is doing this abhorrent thing. And we're all in complete agreement, as we are in reality outside of the hypothetical. We're all in agreement that this is an abhorrent thing that we're observing. Now, what's setting Zulu and I apart from you in this specific case is that Zulu and I are asking, okay, now we need to try and decide if we're going to intervene with what we're seeing. And we need to try and find a way to decide whether or not intervening is appropriate. So Zulu and I have gone all the way back to the natural fact of scarcity and derived a theory of property rights that informs us whether or not we can intervene in this case. Not at all commenting on whether it's abhorrent or not. Now, it seems like what I'm hearing that you're doing is you've circumvented that entirely, and you've said essentially, I see this and I recognize that it's abhorrent, and therefore you're going to go on to say, um, like you're justified in intervening on that basis alone. So I want to know two things really quickly. Just, am I mischaracterizing your process? And either way, I'd like to know, is there another process you're using that's more than just that you find it abhorrent? And can you tell us about that process and what it looks like?
So real quick, that more or less, I think matches characterization. The only parts that may be missing is that I explicitly stated, I think we're all guilty of this. Like this is GG. Like I know you may disagree with it right now, and we can get into that. But I think any move where you're gonna say to me that I guess intuitions or moral intuitions or the process of that is like weak evidence to constitute a defeater or to shake up a view, I'm just gonna, like I said, I'm gonna immediately butt heads with that. I don't think that's true, and I think sooner or later, and I think what I showed when it came to like appealing to critiquing a system if it were to be based on contradictions or what have you, and saying, oh, that's false. I try to show that I think that's just another tacit appeal to an intuition.
It sounds like what you're saying about contradictions has to do with why you're skeptical about accepting the NAP, right? That's why contradictions is coming up?
No.
Okay, because the reason I'm confused is because I'm not rendering contradiction as a critique of your position, right? So what I'm saying is I'm
Yes,
just
I know that, yes.
asking, yeah. So I'm just asking to hear from you, what is. So we've sort of made it clear what our thought process is on how we determined whether intervention was appropriate or not, and we just want to know more before we go on about what process you're using.
Right. Here's the thing though. What I'm trying to say, the way you try to derive that, you stated you appeal to like natural facts or scarcity.
Yeah,
or what have
forget
you.
about us though. Forget about us. Like let's just assume Zulu and I are wrong. I'm just curious about what process you're using.
Oh, it's very clear. I start with, okay, let's assume the NAP. Right. This is what I've been doing. Let's assume the NAP is true. Does it lead to any moral absurdities such that the NAP can no longer be trusted, or it's
No,
weakened?
so
Its
there's a
epistemic justification is
misunderstanding
weakened.
here. If you
Oh,
come
okay.
up with this you're calling it, like, what was it, a moral absurdity? Okay, you're
Yeah, moral
saying,
absurdity.
so you said, let's assume the NAP, and we're following along the NAP, and then we come to this obstacle, and this obstacle is a moral absurdity, and you're like, I have to reject the NAP because it produced this moral absurdity. It brought us to this moral absurdity. Okay, that's an indication that you have something underneath the NAP that's your actual decision making criteria, and that's what we're trying to get to. So you're sort of pointing to it by saying a moral absurdity is this insurmountable obstacle. But we're interested in finding out what process you're using to discern concretely what a moral absurdity is in the first place. Because clearly, if the moral absurdity is playing this function in your acceptance or rejection of the NAP, that's the actual process that you're using, because it underlies and supersedes the NAP for in this process that you're sharing with us.
But the thing is that the process is like, what I'm trying to convey is the process is the same process as you guys. All I have is is a valid deductive argument. Now, just because it's valid, am I saying it's true or possible? Nope, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I'm just using a tool of reasoning, a valid deductive argument. And then once we start with, let's say, even if one were to grant it, more or less an intuitive moral legal principle, the NAP, from the top, and then we go all the way down to what it entails or implies. And if it does imply that it would be wrong for me to pull a man off from his shoulders from engaging in said necrophilic act against a wife corpse or a child corpse, if it implies that it'd be moral for me to do that, then I do think, we should actually reflect more on whether the NAP is true or warranted. Now,
Right. So I'm only going to say this one
yeah.
more time, and then I want to hand it back to Zulu. So you reach, like, the way that you're doing this functionally is making it completely explicit that you have already decided that that is a moral absurdity. So that's a really
No, sir.
important distinction, because Zulu and I are coming to our conclusions about what's legal and not through the process. So you have a different approach here. You have a greater, a more important criteria already in effect, and that's what really needs to be tapped into. That's what I want to understand. Now, I feel like we're sort of dancing around it a little bit, and instead of repeating that question, I'd rather hand it over to Zulu and see if maybe he has a novel approach that might be a little bit more
Can I say
effective.
one more thing? Can I say one
Yeah,
more thing?
absolutely. Go for it.
The only way I think this can be progressed is I'm trying to figure out on how you guys don't use the same process when it comes to the NAP. Like if someone were to say to you, why do you think the NAP is true? What is it? What's going to be your next move? Is it going to be, well, denying it leads you to contradiction? Again, why should I believe contradictions or have to be always be false? Or why should I think that contradictions negates the view, right? That, well, it seems to me it has to appeal to intuition. Second option is, well, I think there are some very particular cases or hypotheticals where it shows the beauty of the NAP, or like the moral strength of the NAP. Again, you're making me imagine and reflect on things. Tacit appeals to intuition there once again. So like how are you not in the same boat with me when it comes to using intuitions as evidence for or against a moral view or a moral principle?
So I would say we're definitely not in the same boat. We're not intuitionists at all. And I think the whole intuitionist view on philosophy that you're presenting here is, interestingly enough, it is absurd. Like if intuitionism was indeed correct, which what would correct even mean? You'd have to intuit intuitionism even. That all of philosophy, this seems to be your claim, that all of philosophy, in fact, terminates in intuition. Well, then how the hell would we even do philosophy in the first place? Like, what would even be the gain in this argument? How could we even have an argument if it's all just, I believe this, you believe that? Like, how can you do philosophy at that level? And of course, we're not actually doing that. In my view, it terminates in a stolen concept fallacy. Namely, you're saying, well, this thing is true because I feel like it is true. So your consciousness is controlling reality, which is the primacy of consciousness. But consciousness is consciousness of something. So consciousness can't be the primary thing. That is the fundamental error you're committing there. And it is absolutely not one that I'm committing. I am explicitly an advocate of the primacy of existence. So we're going about philosophy in two diametrically opposed ways, right down to the most basic premise in metaphysics.
Yeah, real quick though, is that then I would question you. It's very disputed. Well, okay, I think that's a bit strong. It is disputed when it comes to even how we attain like metaphysical knowledge, because there are indeed philosophers of this day. Because now you're appealing to like, the primacy of existence, but that's the thing is like existence. What does existence? How do you come to the conclusion that something exists? Because you have to presuppose a lot of things. Well, one, you have to presuppose you're in contact with reality. There's some causal contact with reality. And I can question you, well, how do you know that being in causal contact with reality gives you like this epistemic knowledge or this metaphysical knowledge, right? Well, it just seems to be the case. It's more expected on the hypothesis that I would be in causal contact with reality compared to like a solipsist or what have you, right? Or I would then question you, because I do think most philosophy, not all, but most philosophy do rely on intuitions a heavy amount, especially metaphysics. For example, personal identity. What makes you the same person from time 1 to time 2? Is it a brain? Is it just the soul? Is it your whole animal organism? Sooner or later, you're gonna try out thought experiments, and from there, philosophers are gonna try to solve these intellectual puzzles, if you will, or try to see which theory best accommodates the data, right? Or the metaphysical data, right? Or even causation. There's multiple theories of causation, right? And once again, we were met with thought experiments for and against several of those views, right? When it comes to the counterfactual theory of causation, or the primitive theory of causation, or even the Humean theory of causation, right? I'm not skeptical of intuition. I genuinely want to know. I think the only way for me to progress with you guys, I want to know, how do you justify the NAP without resorting to intuitive hypothetical cases, without resorting to saying if we deny the NAP, we're led to a performative contradiction, without assuming either the very principle in question or without taking intuitions for granted, right? Or without taking contradictions are always false and they negate a theory, and without assuming that's intuitive.
So how many times have you heard the NAP actually grounded before?
Many times, like how many times? At least 3 from what I recall, from my memory.
Okay. So as far as I'm aware, I've never once encountered somebody who justified or grounded the NAP using hypotheticals. Hypotheticals are something that you can use to explore the implications that flow out from the principle, but we don't, like, a hypothetical does not have a role to play whatsoever in the justification. You could, in other cases, use a hypothetical perhaps to explore like a reductio type argument. But since we're operating from a principle and expanding out, that's not it's not that category of claim where you can use hypotheticals that way as a justification tool. So if we want to, and I'll let Zulu maybe, shake his head or nod, like we can just transition into talking about the NAP, if you'd like. But yeah, I mean, like that's a big different topic. The main thing for me is, we got this main question here, and I'm not satisfied that we haven't gotten past just sort of dancing around it a little bit. So, I got to drill down into this. This is really the key thing that's a problem for us, is that we have a process for deciding what's legal and what's not. That principle is determining it. And we're not using intuition at any point in the justification. I mean, I'm not going to get into justifying it, but just to give like a pinch, we see that there's scarcity. That's our senses. We are understanding through experience what the consequences of being in conditions of scarcity are. And we want to come up with a framework with the people around us that makes it such that the people participating in that framework no longer experience those consequences, at least the social dimension of consequences of scarcity. Now, we don't do that through implementing hypotheticals. Now, if you want to say, and I feel like this is the type of philosophy that I'm going to abstain from, if you want to say that our senses are merely intuitions, I would disagree with that. I'm sure that Zulu would disagree with that sort of application of the senses. But my point is, your argument, if we can really distill it, you've got what you believe might be a critique of the NAP, and it's that the NAP contradicts this moral absurdity. And we need to know what criteria you're using to establish that that's a moral absurdity in the first place, and to establish that the NAP having a moral absurdity in it would even constitute a problem for it categorically. Because we like we said, that's not even the right category of thing we're talking about. Finally, this might just be where the conversation has to end. Are you telling us, am I understanding you correctly, that your process for determining that moral absurdities just have to be rejected is just intuition, and you think that that's okay on the basis that we all must just be using intuition?
Okay. When it comes to the last part, and then I want to actually get into the first part of your response. The last part is it's intuitions, the valid deductive argument, and reflection, and then like continuous debate like this. Like
Okay,
that's all the tools I'm using.
Let's just
When it
only
comes
hear the
to-
valid deductive argument then.
And when it comes to hold on. When it comes to the first part, at this point, you stated you go through this process, okay, and then there's scarcity in the world, right? Or there's this concept of scarcity, if I'm understanding correctly. And from there, sooner or later, this is how the NAP is derived, more or less. Am I understanding this? Okay. Question then. I want you to notice how some things were taken granted without argument. And some of those things. So I guess this would be like, a new argument. Since we have to be this way, right? We have to be this way, right? How do you know, one, there exist people outside of you, two, that your senses are reliable, such that you know there are people outside of you, and such that you're able to know that there's scarcity out there in the world, and three, I also would like to know, why should one start with these starting points. Begin with these starting points. What process did you use to take those assumptions for granted?
So there's a really basic tool in rationality, I guess, in thinking in general, which is that the possibility that something could be wrong alone is not evidence for it being wrong. So it is entirely the case, if you want to take a solipsistic point of view on this, that you could say, well, you don't know that you're not a brain in a vat. How do you truly know that what your senses are giving you? Before we had technology, the philosophers asked this question in the terms of the demon, the demon who was manipulating you with all kinds of visions and sensations. And then when we got better technology, it became the brain in a vat problem, but it's the same exact thing. The problem is there's the mere fact that we can never be 100% certain that that's not happening is not evidence in any capacity that it is the case, or that it's justified to believe it. So the answer to the question about, well, how do I trust my senses, is there is no reason that is available to me not to. And that's sufficient. Now, Zulu, I think, might take a slightly different approach to this. But for me, it's completely satisfactory to say, and I really want the audience to hear this. That this is my message is for people who believe the world is real. And I am completely comfortable with just not even trying to convince people who don't believe the world is real. That is like, that's a good thing. I don't even want them near me, basically. So, yes, there's no reason whatsoever to doubt our senses or to doubt the existence of other people, which is, I mean, that's the same thing. We know there's other people through our senses. And if we get in interaction with the radical skeptic crowd who want to point out the fact that there is this inescapable but infinitesimal possibility that our senses are wrong, even though there's no reason to think that, then I think they are just opting out of cooperation with other human beings, because you have to have that bare minimum in common with other people to cooperate with them. And since the project that Zulu and all of the Ancaps that are in this community are engaged in were involved in the process of discovering the most effective ways of cooperation, you're just not a part of that project if you don't accept reality, and you won't move past that your senses are valid and reliable.
Okay, so I have to respond to that. Is that cool? Because I do think I think that's probably the best response in the sense of making progress here. Here's the issue that I have. Okay, my argument, sir, was not about whether if it's possible, if XYZ is possible, then this is evidence or it negates your view. That was not my argument. My argument is this, or my question, more rather, to be more clear. If you're trying to cast skepticism as intuitions as a, I guess, source of evidence for a moral theory or against one, right? Then I think you are led into what I would call either arbitrariness or this selective skepticism, whatever you call it, because I think there can be, when it comes to the case of knowing our senses are reliable, or when I question you, how do you know the people outside of you exist? How do you know your senses are reliable, right? And then from there you derive the NAP or what have you, right? Those assumptions were taken for granted. And from what I understood, you then said, well, hey, all we can say to the radical skeptic is, or all I'm concerned with is with people who are in touch with reality. Two things, though. First thing, that begs the question, right, against the radical skeptic, right, or a skeptic, or a general one, right? Now, is that bad or good? I actually don't care. I actually think it's a good thing that it begs the question, right? You want to know why? Because I think either way, when it comes to those fundamental disputes, both sides will beg the question. But presumably, you're going to be begging the question in the scenario or for the scenarios that you take to be more obvious, right? Why is it more rational to hold that the external world is real compared to saying that it isn't, right? This is why I asked, what is the argument, right? Do you have further reasons to suppose this is true?
So I can just give you a quick syllogism if you want for that.
Okay.
So if the senses distort, then man is not conscious of reality. Man is conscious of reality. Therefore, the senses do not distort.
Okay, but I need it written out though. I need to see it. I can't see arguments in my head. Sorry, sir. Yeah, sorry about that.
So,
or if you want,
I'll send a link to it in the private chat.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I can try to write it down for you really quickly here on our whiteboard as well.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. I have a terrible imagination, so. just to be clear, at this point, all I need to show my burden, I would think right now in this fun discussion we're having, is I think there are some cases where you guys use intuitions as evidence, and then all I have to say or wonder is why don't we use intuition in this other domain, such as morality? That's all I'm going to have to show.
Well, so I'm not using intuitions, to be clear. Like, that's what I'm getting at.
I know.
I'm not just
you're saying
intuitively saying that I believe my senses. I just intuit it as such.
Okay, that's fine. Yep. Go ahead.
Like, this is the argument. If the senses distort, then man is not conscious of reality. Man is conscious of reality. Therefore, the senses do not distort.
Okay, so this is from what it seems to me, a modus tollens. If P, then not Q. Second premise, Q. Conclusion, not P. That is a modus tollens. Okay.
Yep.
Here's the issue. How do you know modus tollens is a valid form of argument? How do you know that the conclusion, if the premises are true, the conclusion necessarily follows from the true premises without relying on intuition or seeming?
That's
So,
what
I don't want to cut Zulu off here. So Zulu, I want your consent for this.
I'm not asking
I want
a metaphysical question about I'm asking about an epistemic question. How do you know?
For the sake of, for the benefit of the audience, in terms of what we want to communicate to the audience, I want to communicate that it is virtuous in the endeavor that we're engaged in here. Like I said, our project is discovering and developing the best frameworks that we can use to cooperate with other people. That's what we're interested in, right? And this kind of skepticism, I don't want you to feel that I'm begrudging you this type of skepticism in an absolute sense. I think that it has a place in the halls of, certain types of philosophy. I certainly think that as a recreational activity, that there's no, I have no interest in disparaging it anyway. It has no place in the project that we're doing here, which is trying to discover the best ways to cooperate with other people. If you're in the project of trying to cooperate with other people, you've already accepted that there are other people, that your senses are real. So if you want to attack the project and say, how do you even know it's valid to spend time trying to develop a framework for cooperating with other people? And you're not just, let me just assume that this isn't just a sort of recreational navel gazing thing. You're actually genuinely trying to work that angle. I would say that it's virtuous to just disregard that. I'm interested in the conversation where people recognize that reality exists and people recognize that other human beings exist. And I don't consider it, I want to communicate publicly that the best response to have to someone who doubts those things with regards to this project is to simply say, you are free to continue developing your skepticism of reality, but it just doesn't have a role in this topic. Zulu, well, I don't know. Am I taking us off course with that? Are you on the same page, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely correct about this sort of approach, I'll call it that. I mean, fundamentally, what you would have to do in order to deny modus tollens is to endorse contradiction, that in fact it is possible to have the contradictory statements be true, that if the senses distort, man is not conscious of reality, and that man is conscious of reality, i.e., that you can both have it, that man is not conscious of reality and that he is conscious of reality. That's what you'd have to endorse. This flies in the face of the law of identity. A is A, right? To be is to be something, right? That's the fundamental grounding point. And as we know, things are. That is the starting point in philosophy. There are indeed things. Existence exists.
Okay. Good responses. My response is, when it comes to things exist, or those are starting points. But that's why can't someone say, well, first off, I actually like that term, but I don't think my epistemic question still wasn't answered. If you're saying it's a starting point, are you coming to this from a seeming, or from it just being, that's just what it is? Because the is answer is metaphysical. I'm concerned, because intuition is brought up, I'm concerned with the epistemic one, right? More or less, one can...
But just to be clear, before we even get to the epistemology, the very first thing is that existence exists. Everything else
I don't know
rests
what you
upon
mean by
that
that.
fact. There
That's a
is
new
such
one
a
to me.
thing as so existence exists means that there are indeed things out there. There is. That's what it's saying. There is, right? Because there are things, i.e., particular things. Well, that would be the law of identity, which is very closely related, but slightly different.
But that's not. Forgive me, brother. I don't think that's true in virtue of the law of identity. That seems to be more so as a metaphysical theory. How are you deriving a
Well,
metaphysical
the law of identity
view?
is indeed metaphysics. Yes, I agree with that.
I would say the laws of identity are these like logical rules, right? Or these things
Yes.
that just, but
So
the
yes,
thing is, you have to
it is a
assume.
rule of how you have to orient your mind. Yeah, you have to accept those metaphysical axioms if you're going to do anything proper in epistemology. Yes, but the
Right,
law of
but
identity still is a metaphysical fact.
but the thing is, then we circle back to the question: how are metaphysical facts known? How? What is this process? You guys question me on the process.
So are you
I said
asking me how I know that existence exists?
yes, absolutely, yeah. And you're
What
way
would the
out of here from what
alternative
I'm.
be?
Sorry.
What would the alternative be?
What do you mean? Like, oh, you just
What
being a
would the
radical skeptic? That
alternative
would be the
be?
alternative. Yeah, you being a radical skeptic.
No,
yeah.
no. You can't be a radical skeptic and say that existence doesn't exist, because then you wouldn't exist to do the radical skepticism.
But then you also presuppose another metaphysical view, such as you're
Radical
against like
skepticism is just
nihilism on the
saying,
self.
I don't know anything. Right? It's not saying that things don't in fact exist. There is no such thing as existence. That's not what radical skepticism is.
No, but what no. When
Like, I
you're
don't know of any
saying,
philosopher who says that things in fact do not exist.
do I have a story for you? Here's the thing though. When it comes to you saying this would presuppose that you exist, that's why you cannot be a radical skeptic or a nihilist on the external world, more or less, or on things existing. The thing is though, that's all again presupposing a very plausible premise that I actually don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you. But the thing is, you're presupposing this because I think it's very intuitive, which is that there is a self, that there is a you, right? Because there are metaphysicians, not only in today's time. Well, in today's time, it would be like Peter Unger, right? Peter Unger believes that we don't exist or that he doesn't exist, literally, and he wrote a full fucking philosophy book on it.
And you think this
Now-
doesn't sound like the ravings of a madman?
Yeah, I agree with you. Yes, they are. Yeah. Now let's take that. These are the statements of a raving madman. Yes. Amen. Why can't someone say the same thing when it comes to someone saying, hey, bro, don't stop the father or the husband from having sex with his dead wife or his dead child? That seems to me the acts of a madman, such that we should pull him off from the shoulders.
Hold on. There are two claims there.
Uh-huh.
Yes, perhaps it is the acts of a madman.
Yeah.
But the second premise there is that, therefore, we have the right to pull him off. That is the premise which you have at no point justified. In fact, you said that you have no justification. It just feels right to you.
Well, I didn't say feels. Intuitions are not matters of feeling. These are intuitions are like more so you grasping something is true or warranted, and
In what way
it's
did
possible
you
there could be
grasp it as
further
true?
reasons. Sorry,
In what way did you grasp it as true?
what do you mean in what way? Like me reflecting
Like,
on it, me
walk
thinking.
us through how you grasped it as true, and then maybe we'll grasp it as true as well.
You see me grasping it at the very least when I went down to the valid deductive argument, and then me
Go on.
concocting you
Sure.
these hypotheticals.
Tell us how to grasp it as true.
If you cannot grasp it, or you don't even think this is a
Then just tell
plausible
us how to
counterexample
grasp
to
it as true.
Wiccan and NAP, then I don't know what else to say to you.
Share
But I
share
think I
the
have
deductive
shown when
argument
it
with
came
us.
to your other
what
arguments.
you could say to us is show us how you grasped it as true.
Well,
You
hold
said
on.
there's a deductive
on,
argument, right?
on pain of an infinite regress, it's immediate. Then for two, I have shown, I think clearly, when it comes to your guys' other arguments, or when you try to in other domains where you guys are, not using intuitions, I think it became
but can
pretty
you
clear
show
you
us how
guys
to
are
grasp
relying
it
on
as true?
intuitions as a source of evidence for or
No, but
against
hold
the
on. But
metaphysical
can you
theory.
show how you grasped it as true?
I just said it. On pain
No,
of
you
an
didn't.
infinite regress, it's immediate. And
Go on,
empirically, you saw
What
me
we
grasp
want
it.
I don't know
to
what you mean by that.
want to
Or,
communicate
if anything, you
outwards.
can take my testimony as reliable. Can you not?
Well, hold on, just a moment. I just want to really take this opportunity to emphasize, because we are doing a show here. I want to emphasize that it's virtuous to be able to justify what you're doing at a deeper level than I have become aware of its truth immediately. We don't find that to be sufficient, and none of the things that we accept as true are the result of that process. So, I mean, to me, this is the same as if we were doing a show on atheism and somebody called in and said, my argument for God's existence is that I believe in God, and I believe in God because it's just immediately true to me that that is the case. We are naturally not going to accept that premise. It's obviously the case that we don't find that to be immediately available to us. Otherwise, we would believe it. So we're going to have to insist that we're just we're not accepting that one. Now, you have mentioned a couple of times that there's a deductive argument. And since you mentioned a bunch of philosophy terms, I'm sure you know that, talking about radical skepticism as a topic isn't a deductive argument. So I'd like you to share with us, please, what is the deductive argument that establishes that this is something that ought to be stopped?
Yeah. So here's the thing. When it came to me saying that it's a valid deductive argument, I'm simply assuming the NAP is true. And then we explore through hypothetical
You
cases
aren't.
such as the
You
one
are
I
not
given.
assuming
Yeah.
the NAP is true.
Yeah.
Because
wait, hold
no,
on.
you can't be.
Wait, hold on.
No, you can't be because
hold on.
the way the NAP is
How do you
not
think?
merely.
How do you think arguments are trotted out in philosophy when it comes to showing a problem against the view? You have to assume a principle to be true or warranted.
Right. So
yeah,
the NAP being taken as true, right, would just make it necessary that you can't stop the person from doing that.
Wait, whoa, that's the thing in dispute. That's the very thing in dispute, brother.
No, what's
assuming NAP for quote unquote
hold on.
We now have to assume
grave
necessity
misunderstanding
here.
on your part. Hold on. The NAP, what is in dispute is never been that the NAP gives a certain prescription for the situation. We're all in agreement that the NAP gives that prescription. That's not in dispute. And it shouldn't be in dispute because that's objective. What was in dispute is whether or not the NAP is true, since it has that objective link with that outcome, right? Like, so we're not disagreeing that the NAP objectively leads to that prescription, right?
Okay, yeah. As of now, it doesn't seem like we're in disagreement there. But no, there's a disagreement whether you think the counterexample or the quote-unquote counterexample is enough to weaken it or to render its epistemic justification for you guys, for you two, to be lowered.
Right. So what we said before is that in order for us to accept that that's even a coherent question, is we need to understand, why does this moral absurdity pose that problem? One, how is it established that it's a moral absurdity? Two, how is it established that moral absurdities can't also be legal?
Okay, here's the thing. In the descriptive sense, moral absurdities can be legal, and this is why there are some reformers in history to overcome those moral absurdities. In the first part, I'm trying to say, when you try to question, oh, well, why should we believe these moral absurdities weaken a view? I'm here explaining to you, hey, there's no alternative. Because guess what? We tried out. We went through all the alternatives. You guys tried out to me. You can give a syllogism, or at least a contradiction, or you experience the natural world, and from there you derive the NAP somehow with, seeing people seeing their scarce resources, and then on and so forth. And I'm trying to say, right, what Javier is trying to say is that when you are being skeptical of intuitions being used as evidence in a moral domain, in one domain, then it seems to me, on a parity of reasoning, you should be skeptical of intuitions in another domain. And I think I showed that you actually do rely on intuitions or seemings or intellectual seemings true in an other domain, such as the reliability of the senses, knowing that a freaking conclusion in a modus tollens argument necessarily follows. Do you not know what necessity means? It's always true. Where in the hell do you see...
When you say that a proposition is true, you are at the same time saying that the proposition is not false. Now that's not a convention. That's intrinsic to what you are saying yourself. You cannot utter that something is true without simultaneously uttering that it is not false. That is intrinsic in what you're saying. It's not a matter of convention.
I'm not sure where that response comes. Are you saying I'm presupposing what? Of course. Well, one can say, for one,
that's how you get to like modus tollens, right? Like modus tollens, like Zulu pointed out, The validity of it is relative to the fact that contradictions can't be accepted.
And why is that? Why can't contradictions be accepted?
The mere fact that you're making a statement of any kind whatsoever, you are presupposing that they can't be. It's right in your words. When you say something is true, you are saying it's not false. That can't be. Those two things can't be separated from each other.
But that's assuming the principle at hand.
What principle is being assumed?
The principle of non-contradiction. Sorry.
No, I'm not assuming the principle of non-contradiction. I'm recognizing first.
Oh, you're recognizing first, right?
Right.
You're recognizing first, and it seems self-evident enough, right? And this is how you argue against me. How is that any different from what I'm doing?
Am I understanding correctly then that anything that is intuitive to you is automatically justified?
No, sir. There are prima facie intuitions at first glance, or how things seem to you when you first look at some evidence. And then there's secondary, tertiary, or secunda facie, or tertiary facie intuitions, such as how things seem to you once you look at all the relevant evidence. And then from there, you can say, okay, well, all the other theories suck ass. But this is just an example. I'm not limiting this to like the moral domain. This is just like any domain. You can say this in any domain. Okay, all the other theories suck ass. My theory seems to be the best in solving these puzzles or answering these questions, what have you. Therefore, boom, at last glance, my view is ultima facie justified, considering all things.
Zulu, welcome back. I'm sorry that you missed some of the substance there.
Did he give the deductive argument?
He did not give the deductive argument. He was.
But the reason why, though, is because for one, I'm trying to show. I did say what my burden is, right? My main burden right now is try to show. I think you guys are using intellectual seemings.
Do you
and
have?
Then when I asked you the question, how we know the logical consequence of from true premises, how is that necessarily true, or how does it necessarily follow?
A deductive argument.
Sorry?
Do you have a deductive argument?
I can make one. What do you want me to make? What?
The deductive argument for your premise that if something is bad, it is therefore proper or good even to go in and stop that thing by force.
Yeah, immoral. Yeah. I would say not. I was classified the term to immoral, and the deductive argument. Okay, premise one. You ready?
Give me one second here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Wait, where are you? I can't see what you're typing.
Oh, sorry. That was my own notes for myself.
I thought. Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. Premise one. Assume NAP is true. Or is that problematic? Do you guys want me to say assume NAP? Like what?
Well, it's not problematic immediately, but you're going to contradict it in about 2 seconds.
Yeah,
sure.
It's going to be problematic for you.
Okay. Premise two. If NAP is true, just write that first part. If NAP is true, then it leads to necrophilia in cases concerning the Javier's father's like dead wife.
We don't need to be specific. We'll call them unsavory outcomes, and that's completely sufficient.
Okay. Then you can just say conclusion leads to unsavory outcomes. Boom. That is MP.
Your conclusion is that it leads to unsavory outcomes.
But that has to be more classified, though. I would say
I just want to clarify here. Is your argument one? Assume the NAP is true. So
you put those words there. I didn't say unsavory outcomes.
Hold on.
I didn't say unsavory outcomes.
You absolutely fucking did.
Where did I say unsavory outcomes?
Okay, so unsavory. Let's say father necrophilia then leads to father.
Yes, I didn't say unsavory outcomes, right?
Okay, it doesn't make. These are interchangeable. This is not like semantically meaningful.
But he wouldn't have a problem if I didn't say that.
Real quick. So is your argument premise one, the NAP, premise two, if NAP, then it leads to father necrophilia. Premise three, therefore it leads to father necrophilia.
Yep.
What?
And then that's
premise two. You just stated premise two twice.
No, sir. Premise two is a conditional. If P, then Q. The conclusion is Q. That is not circular, sir. That is literally a valid modus ponens argument.
Go on.
What are you saying?
Continue.
No, hold on. He just said that my conclusion is presupposed in one of the premises. Where is it presupposed? Where? Show me now.
Okay, so I would disagree.
And you would render all valid deductive modus ponens arguments to be circular then.
This actually, in fact, does not show what you needed to show. Your conclusion had to be, therefore, it's fine for us to go in and stop this thing by force.
Okay, how about this?
I don't see that. I don't see that conclusion here.
This is what we'll do. You remember when you said when you stated the statement, these are the ravings of a madman? Okay.
Give me your deductive argument.
No, we'll show it.
Argument that shows it's fine for you to go in there.
Show me. Hold on. Write this statement down.
I'm ready. I'm ready to write it down.
Write these two statements down. Just two. Right, just two. Write proposition 1. Just that. Proposition 1. Okay, say this. The world. How about this? No, I got it. Proposition 1. I don't know I have hands. Say that. Proposition 2. I know I have hands. Okay. Which one should a rational person endorse? Proposition 1 or Proposition 2, and why? Without begging the question.
They should endorse Proposition 2, presuming they're not, severely disabled in their senses. But what I want you to do right now,
okay, and what? And how is this established? Wait, how is this established that you know you have hands?
What is your deductive argument?
Wait, how do you establish you know you have hands? How do you establish? How do you? For one, I already gave you a deductive argument. For two, you're just running skepticism now.
No, not for the conclusion.
So how do you establish Proposition 2? How do you? I know I have hands. I know I have hands. Is that just as plausible that it's
gentlemen? I don't want to have to intervene, but I'm going to have to
when they rape their dead wife or when they rape their dead girl.
Mr. Javier,
look at the Proposition 2.
Proposition 2. I have to mute you.
I know I have hands, and then compare that to the other proposition.
I had to mute you. And once I start warning you and you talk over the warning, I got to intervene. Okay. We don't want to have to mute anyone ever. We're going to unmute you, but let's just get to a slightly more structured discussion. Okay, so can we please, I'm asking as a matter of mercy, can we move away from the hands thing? We're already so far down the rabbit holes. We're going to hit...
No.
Okay,
no,
actually, we're going to move past the hands thing because we're so far down the rabbit hole right now. We don't even have...
this is good.
I don't know if it's good for anybody. It's not good for you. It doesn't feel good for us. So can we try to get to the deductive argument? You have established...
No, hold on. You guys are saying, for one, I already gave it. I don't know what you guys are saying. But then for two...
All right, I'm muting you because we need to stay structured. You made me write this down. What you made me write down establishes that the NAP leads to unsavory outcomes. It doesn't even prove that. And you can when I say unsavory outcomes, you can do the necrophilia thing. I'm using it as a stand-in term. Okay, that's what I mean. I'm talking about the necrophilia. If the NAP is true, whatever, you've established that the NAP leads to unsavory outcomes. You have not provided any reason to accept that the NAP leading to unsavory outcomes implies any other inferences. You need to tell us, do you have a premise that says anything that has unsavory outcomes is false? Because you actually said the opposite earlier. Now, you're unmuted. You said earlier, I quoted you, it is possible for moral absurdities to be legal. And we're talking about a legal framework. So the only
not necessarily. Zulu said it was both. Zulu seemed to have
said that moral absurdities can be legal.
No. Zulu, when I asked him, does he take that
as
a moral
not
or legal
Zulu.
principle? He said
you said moral absurdities can be legal. You said that.
So I'm saying that as a descriptive claim. I'm just saying that. Yeah. Okay.
So,
what? I'm not. I didn't mean to put it as a freaking argument. No.
Okay. So what are we doing to advance this to the next level? Because all you've shown is that you're not satisfied with the conclusions that come from the NAP.
Okay. No, I have not shown we're just quote unquote just feelings or just unsatisfied. So this is why. So I thought this was super obvious that we didn't need to extend the argument. So we'll extend the argument. But I will be very clear. Once we extend this argument, will we explicitly say, "Oh, the NAP is unwarranted" or "NAP is false"? Will I be given the space and time to show how this connects to the propositions below? That I know
I'm not going to guarantee anything of that sort. I want to move the conversation along here, and there's been an unnecessary amount of resistance. Can you please...
Well, no, there's been a lot of resistance from you guys. You guys never answered my question how you know the principle of non-contradiction is true.
Okay, I'll show you. I'm going to mute you, and the reason I'm muting you is so that I can answer your question in less time. You're asking us how our intuitions are in some way separate, and I will let you respond to this. You're asking us how our intuitions are any different. Your intuition that the necrophilia situation is bad is equally valid because we've used intuitions in our foundational premises. And because we've done that, we can no longer disagree with your use of intuition. I'm going to explain why I think that that's false right now. What is an example of one of the intuitions that Zulu and I are relying on? It's that existence is real. So, like Zulu said, what's the alternative to existence is real? That exists, well, that would be existence isn't real. So, that is not on equal footing with I can stop people from doing things that are moral absurdities. It is completely conceivable that it's the case that you cannot stop people legally from doing moral absurdities. It is not the case that there's anything reasonable about saying existence doesn't exist. These are not on equal footings. Now, the next one is that the senses are reliable. Like we're just saying, well, the senses are, that's just an intuition. It is not the case that there's any reason whatsoever. There's not a single reason in the world to think the senses are not reliable. And there is an almost unlimited amount of information to the contrary. Now, that does not cross over to the intuition that you're trying to say is on equal footing here, where you're saying, well, I think that I should be legally allowed to stop people from doing things I think is absurd. And you made an assumption, you made an intuition earlier, so they're on equal footing. They're not on equal footing in any sense. And finally, the same is true for that other people exist. Okay, there's no evidence for that whatsoever. All the evidence points to the contrary. Then you take this categorically different statement about whether or not you ought to be able to legally intervene in something you think is absurd, and you're trying to pass these off as a conflation. Now, I understand that there's a possibility that like there's a philosophical circle you're aware of where these sort of navel gazing things are considered valid, but I've already done everything that I could possibly want to do to see it be a victory from my point of view, because what the audience is hearing right now is the disagreement requires that you deny reality, deny that people exist, deny that your senses, and that you think that those things are equally valid as the legal prescriptions you want. So, no, those things are not on equal footing, and you are not justified in saying whatever intuition you want just because you've pointed out that we have epistemic seemings or moral seemings. You're unmuted.
Okay, real quick. That's possibly the. So I'm going to say a couple of things more. If I hear something that doesn't seem like we're going to make any progress, then I can allow you guys to have the last word. When it came to your steel man, I think you got a good chunk of it right. So that's good on you. So thank you very much for that. The issue now, this is what it comes down to. I know I have hands. The senses are reliable. Existing exists. Okay, right. The question is, which is more intuitive? Which is more plausible? I'm not saying you have to deny both or accept, but which is more plausible? Are these principles you're assuming taken for granted? Because you did admit you now use intuitions now. I did hear that. So now, I know I have hands. Galazar, not Yuzu, Galazar. He did say he has intuitions in the other domains. So, okay. Now, I know I have hands. Is this just as plausible to say, oh man, I should really pull that father off from raping his dead wife's corpse or his dead child's corpse? And that should be actually a legal act to do. Which is more plausible? Are they equally plausible? If so, how come?
I'm not using my intuitions to inform my legal plausibility. I think that's absurd. I don't participate in that. And I'm happy to just say, what we're representing up here is using our best efforts to get to the bottom of the legal question. And the alternative that's being posed in this call is, I just think it's obvious that we should. And I'm completely satisfied to leave it there to say that's the alternatives that people are being offered in this call. And I think everybody knows where all three of us stand.
Okay. A good discussion. I love you guys. And that's all I have.
Thanks so much for calling in. We appreciate it. You're welcome to have the last word, by the way. If you're taking off now, then you're more than welcome to have the last word. You can have, 2 minutes if you want.
I'm fine. I'm fine with leaving it there. Because I feel like if I do start a last word, I feel like I may implicitly pull in another point or several points, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that.
So, if you want to, I'd be interested if you want to leave the last word, just so that our viewers can understand. I've obviously made my presentation about what the alternatives are, right? So, and I'm not trying to mischaracterize you. I'm giving you this prompt to give the true, the honest, the sincere version. But from our point of view, the alternative you're offering is down the radical skeptical line of questioning reality and all that stuff. So why would anybody in our audience? Why should they take that approach instead of the approach that we're offering as an alternative?
Oh, well, this would just simply start with my thesis or what I was trying to argue for. We have what it seems to me we have a theory, the NAP theory, the Ancap theory. You can label it whatever you want. It leads to what it seems to me, and what more, it could, dare I say, be like almost like it clashes against with a moral universal, what have you, or like a Morean data, a piece of Morean data, or a Morean truth, where you have a moral theory, and it literally entails that a father would be permitted to engage in sex with his dead wife or a dead little girl, and it will be impermissible for me to stop him from that, right? Now, I also did pretrial cannibalism. This seems to me this would be permissible if he even ate the corpse. I even said that, right? Now, we have pieces of two Morean data, right? Cannibalism is wrong, or cannibalism concerning a corpus is wrong, even, given the NAP or somewhat. And then we also have necrophilia is wrong, right? That's two pieces of Morean data, right? And then now let's compare. If I trust that I know I have hands, if that seems plausible to me, then do the other propositions seem plausible if we do like a Morean comparison? Well, it seems like it does. And if I know that I have hands, and if I know necrophilia is wrong, whatever, then NAP seems to have been weakened because it goes against those Morean truths. That's it. That's all.
All right. Well, I think it wouldn't be fair for us to respond to that since it was the last word. So thanks so much for calling in. We always invite callers of all walks of life and creeds, and that was a perspective I don't think we've had enough of on the show yet. So thanks so much for calling in, and feel free to call back in another time. Zulu, we're at the end of the our call list now. We've been here for 2 hours. I wonder, before I get into our outro, if there's anything you'd like to talk about.
No, I think it was a pretty good call. Make sure anybody who's watching, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. How many subs are you off from actual monetization?
Exactly 50, and we can start getting super chats.
There we go. So there's 42 people watching right now. If you guys go ahead and if you're not subscribed, then subscribe, and then maybe we can get to 500 pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the super chats because I have every intention of letting super chatters get involved in the calls, have some fun, and I think it's going to be fun for me. It's going to be fun for you guys. I imagine we've got some pretty clever super chatters out there. So I want to remind everybody, if you're watching and you're not familiar with the show, you call in through our Discord. So if you're not in the Discord, get in the Discord and don't get banned if you want to call in. You want to go in there. The links are in the description. They're also linked in a pinned comment in our YouTube comments as well. We're streaming on other platforms now. We're streaming today on YouTube and Twitch. We're also going to be streaming on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok shortly. I just got to get some infrastructural things worked out with them. They keep banning me. I think that there's a bias against Ancaps is the most plausible explanation there. I'm not sure. That covers it just about for me. We've been at this for 2 hours, so I'll save the rest of our text questions for next time. Thanks so much, everyone, for calling in and watching, and we'll see you next week at 5 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. If you want to get that converted to your own time zone, join the Discord.